Oh great, another remake, I thought. Just another rehash with nothing new to say. I'll give it a few minutes to see if it wins me over. Cut to 8 episodes later, and I'm convinced Netflix's Ripley is a masterpiece in its own right. Easily my favourite TV show of 2024 so far. They say television is a writer's medium, but given most viewers already knew the story, I'd say the credit largely belongs to director Steven Zaillian's unique vision. Zaillian has had an impressive screenwriting career, with credits on classics like Schindler's List, Mission Impossible, Hannibal, and Moneyball, to name just a few. But it's only in the last decade that he's turned his talents to both writing and directing television, and I honestly feel that Ripley is his most impressive work to date. It's a carefully crafted suspense thriller that genuinely feels like a Hitchcock classic from the 1950s that will inspire many filmmakers to come. It's impossible to watch this series and not be blown away by the visuals. Almost every shot feels like an award-winning photograph. Cinematographer Robert Elswit, who filmed other masterpieces like There Will Be Blood, put a large concentration on space. The contrasted wide frames and overhead shots capture the Gothic architecture perfectly, and the city's infrastructure creates a sense of the story in a way other films ignore. Because Ripley is really a lesson in how much your locations can and should impact your storytelling, as the characters will always have to adapt to the space they exist in. But visuals aside, what is it about Ripley that makes it feel so unique? Now there will be some spoilers from here, but because it is a remake, I can assure you that what happens isn't nearly as important as how it feels as it unfolds. So the show needs to be watched in full to be understood properly, as no words or explanations can compare to the experience itself. Unlike almost anything I've ever seen before, Ripley puts a heavy focus on the mechanics of murder, the step-by-step decision-making of the entire process, from the act itself to the disposal of the body to the social aftermath. And Zaillian doesn't rush anything, he lets each scene breathe, to the point that both of the famous murder sequences last 25 and 32 minutes respectively, from the very start of the action to the end of the episode. Even if the decision to take a life seems opportunistic and quick, once it's done, things slow down. So we're now just spending time with the killer in the immediate aftermath of the act. And even though Tom is a sociopath who's hard to empathize with, by spending such dedicated time with him in what are the most intimate and defining moments of his life, we become completely engaged with him in a way we don't normally get to experience with evil characters. And this is the beauty of doing this story as a series instead of a movie, because the story can now allocate its time and focus differently. Over the years, we've all seen so many on-screen murders that we're basically desensitized to it. We see someone get killed and think, now what? As typically the filmmakers cut past the more mundane details of the process to get to the next major plot point. But by doing an 8-part series, Zaillian now has the time to tell this story the way he wants. He stated, "I had a little note scribbled on a post-it when I started this saying, it's easier to kill somebody than it is to get rid of the body. I wanted to show that. Even getting rid of a body that's laying down in a little boat is hard to get rid of. I thought this could be an opportunity to try something that I'd like to, which is showing these things in what feels like real time, and how difficult it is." And this decision makes a huge difference in how the story feels for the viewer. No detail is too mundane. Whether Tom is contemplating, cleaning up, or carrying heavy loads, getting rid of a body is a laborious and isolating task. No one is going to help you, and everyone that sees you at any point of the night is a potential witness. So rather than skipping over it or cutting to the next key moment, Zaillian puts you right there with him. You have to go through the motions and see just how macabre the whole process of getting rid of a body is. It's essentially a ticking time bomb, and the longer you're in its presence, the more at risk you are. But part of why Ripley feels like such high art is that Zaillian never explains what Tom is doing or why. He trusts his audience to notice what the character notices, or to at least search for the rationality in each decision. A lesser director would use voiceover to explain the protagonist's next step or visually put together a plan, but that would take us out of the central conflict of the moment. Is he going to get away with it? So instead we just witness Tom's actions step by step, in excruciating detail, as what could be more fascinating than watching someone trying to get rid of a body and hide the evidence of their crimes? It's an imperfect process, filled with trial and error. Nothing is as simple as you'd like it to be, and any mistake, no matter how small, could cost you everything. That's tension, that's suspense, that's stakes. So Zaillian keeps us trapped in that uncomfortable uncertainty for as long as possible, drawing out each moment, which makes for exhilarating viewing. And to make the events feel more raw and realistic, he never uses music to intrude on what's happening, or to tell us how to feel about it. Instead, he opts for silence and local sound effects, which is far more ominous. All of these decisions stop the show feeling like televised fiction and start to feel more like a fly-on-the-wall documentary, as it's not allocating its time in the way most TV shows do. It has different priorities. Filmmaking is such a collaborative process that sometimes it's hard to know what the director is truly responsible for. The story may already technically be on the page, but how that story is told, the tone, style, and pace, is down to the director. If I were to sum it up crudely, directing is details. Because storytelling is really just about what details you choose to include. When you watch a movie, ask yourself, where is the director putting the weight of the story? They have limited time to keep your attention, so what details do they focus on to keep you engaged and invested in what's happening? In Ripley, because Tom is usually alone, Zaillian has to make objects and locations feel like characters in themselves, such as the elevator or the telephone. The elevator has a meaningful impact on so many key moments in the story, as whether or not it's working determines how each scene unfolds. These are the minor details of everyday life that we don't often think about, but they add a certain complexion to our existence. For instance, some of Ripley's most tense scenes are when Tom observes his enemies from the top of the staircase, as they speak to the landlady down below.
No, è uscito.
No, l'ho visto. No, sono sicura.
No, madam, you're wrong.
These little details matter a lot to the tone of the story, as what one character might be whispering, who might be figuring out what, and how much time he has to come up with an answer is all Tom cares about. His life literally depends on it, and he doesn't have a job or any other relationships to ever distract him. And this is what's unique about Ripley. Zaillian puts our focus on the in-between moments, the eavesdropping, the calculating, the waiting. The same can be said for Tom's telephone, another object that takes on a life of its own, as whenever it rings, it's essentially a warning alarm that danger has arrived, whether it be one of Dickie's friends or the inspector investigating the murder. Tom doesn't even need to answer the phone for it to fulfill its purpose, as he often uses it to simply buy more time. This adds more tension to each scene, as we can hear the potential threat bubbling down below. And then we have to wait in anticipation until the consequences of his actions inevitably arrive on his doorstep. One of Tom Ripley's skills is being able to anticipate human behaviour, and that same theme is present in these details, as we repeatedly go through the same pattern again and again. The straining sounds of the elevator, the door closing, the approaching footsteps, and then a knock on the door. To the point that even the viewer can practically time the routine and anticipate their arrival. So we're becoming as attuned as Tom is to the predictable patterns of human behaviour. Hitchcock once explained the difference between surprise and suspense. A surprise is when two characters are innocently talking, and then boom, a bomb goes off and surprises the audience with a shock they never saw coming. That gives you maybe 15 seconds of intense engagement. But if instead you tell the audience that there's a bomb under the table, but the characters don't know about it, then the longer you drag the scene out, the more intense the audience's engagement becomes, as they don't know if the characters will get away before it explodes. Ripley uses the same process here. We know Tom's secret, and the other characters arriving at his building, calling his phone, or knocking on his door are the bomb. We just don't know if it's going to go off or not. Zaillian often plays with our expectations by visually showing us the active threats in the room that Tom has to be wary of, whether it's the ring on his finger, the passports on his table, or the initialed suitcase under his bed. If he didn't show us this, then we would be less engaged with what's unfolding before our eyes. But by highlighting the potential bombs in the room, now we can't look away. What's sublime about Ripley's storytelling is that all the small details that we've paid attention to because Tom pays attention to them come back into play in the form of the inspector, which rewards all of our diligence with even more anticipation, as he's already pieced together most of Tom's movements. He knows which hotels he signed into as Dickie, and has spoken to every receptionist that saw him, which creates this intense feeling of claustrophobia in their exchanges, as every small detail and minor throwaway comment is honed in on by the inspector. Which I think unveils the real purpose of the show's storytelling style: to incriminate the viewer. Zaillian makes you pay attention to the details a criminal needs to pay attention to. He makes you witness how brutal, cold, and inhumane the mechanics of murder are. And by making the audience an accomplice to this cold, calculating killer, as he grinds through each tedious step of the process with no remorse, he's created a uniquely dark masterclass in suspense that currently stands as one of the best remakes ever made, as it's managed to not just expand but improve on the original in a way I never saw coming, and can now never forget. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.